The Just podcast is brought to you by ReCity Network. ReCity is the Triangle's hub for social impact. If you're interested in learning more about ReCity, start by booking a tour at recitynetwork.org. ReCityNetwork.org is also where you can go to subscribe to their monthly newsletter or make a donation to support ReCity's work. The website again is recitynetwork.org.
Before we get started, we wanted to let you know that we're tackling some tough subjects today. And just like we take a moment to check in with ourselves, we're going to encourage you to do the same. We talk about subjects like incarceration, and we want to be sensitive to your needs. These are heavy topics, so make sure you show up for yourself if needed. You're listening to Just, stories about the people working to build thriving communities rooted in justice, a part of the Capital Broadcasting Podcast Network in partnership with ReCity and Coastal Credit Union. I'm Jess Averhart, co-founder of Black Wall Street Homecoming.
And I'm Rob Shields, executive director of the ReCity Network.
All right, look, so here's why we're here. We're here to get proximate. We're here to listen. We're here to process. And we're here to help you process.
But here's what we're not going to do. We're not going to be preachy because we don't have all the answers. And we will never make you feel like an outsider.
Keeping with the theme of sharing, we always want to acknowledge the whole person, and that starts with our personal check-in.
Let's do it.
I'm excited to share with our listeners my check-in today. So this is not about me. This is about my son. So if any of you listened to that first episode, I hope you all did. You probably saw my son maybe on TikTok doing his dance video. He's 17. He's 6'5". He's a senior, and he's also a football player. He's a wide receiver. And so he just signed, this is his first adult move, to attend Morehouse College in Atlanta.
Wow.
But y'all, I am thrilled that my son will be playing college football, and I'm more excited about him graduating from Morehouse and being a Morehouse man. They have an amazing legacy of building Black men into just men of real honor, and they do a lot of really incredible work in some of the work that we're talking about through this podcast. So I'm very proud of him. It's also the home of Martin Luther King. He graduated from there.
Wow.
Spike Lee, right? Who else?
That's a legacy right there.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I can't wait. When you make the T-shirts for your cheering section, I'm an XL.
I got you.
Okay.
I got you. Done. So we're proud of him. But what's your check-in?
This must be, we didn't sync up notes ahead of time, but this is brag about your kids time,
Ooh,
I guess.
Fantastic.
So I'm going to go in a complimentary direction, but I have 4 young kids, 6-year-old, 5-year-old, 3-year-old, and 2-year-old. The 3-year-old is a girl, and she's a spitfire. I mean, she just sunbeam wherever she goes. She's making the whole room smile. So she started this thing that she started to explain to us basic household items, but in her own 3-year-old way. And we would be like, what in the world is this? We don't know what you're saying.
Right.
So it started, this started with her singing a song to me in the morning when my wife was not there. I'm the only interpreter. She's just singing this song, and I have zero clue what she's saying.
Yeah, she's 3.
Zero clue.
Yeah.
Turns out she was singing one of the songs from Kanye's new album.
Oh.
Word for word.
Oh, no.
And I did not have any context.
Are you serious?
And apparently it was very clear to the rest of the world. And the album is amazing. Jesus is King. That one. Yeah, it's like a gospel album.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Kanye's had a whole big thing going on, right?
I don't know. Yes, it's true. He is having church on Sunday.
His life has dramatically changed. So anyway, she's singing me his song. And I'm like, so my wife takes it, records it, puts it on social media, and basically is like, what song is this? And so she starts turning these descriptions into trivia. So that has led to, we've moved past music to her describing ice cream sandwiches.
For sure.
Describing a cheese Ritz bit to us. And how a 3-year-old would do that is the cutest thing in the world.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm not on Instagram, or I don't post maybe once a year. I'm not a good follow, but if you want entertainment, you should check out my wife's Instagram for my 3-year-old, who is describing basic things in life and doing it in a way that's going to just melt your heart.
I love it. So our kids bring us joy.
Being parents are amazing.
It is. And you have so much time before you're sending them off to college, so enjoy all the moments.
Yes.
We're going to talk about this incredible movie, Just Mercy. But I want our listeners to sort of just, take this in. This is a 101 class, okay? And we're going to get a little bit deeper in 102 next, or 201 or whatever it is, to help us unpack this a little bit more. But just stay open. Stay open to the content. Don't get overwhelmed, because it shuts you down from taking more in, right? And so just join us on this. And then we're going to deep dive again with the district attorney of Durham County, who's going to help us really bring it into focus. reason why we wanted to talk about this now is so relevant because Just Mercy came out near the beginning of this year, 2020. And has really made a strong impact. Now, the book has been out and there's all the buzz, right? Bryan Stevenson's book on Just Mercy and his lived experience. But bringing it to scale on the big screen really takes it to another level. It's like this. Podcasting helps bring scale to issues, but the movies, that's a whole different ballgame. And it really can change the way we look and view how we move within our communities and in the justice system. So
this buzzword of mass incarceration.
Yes.
Just to frame that up, that's a big word, right? But I'm going to throw out some stats for you just to help frame this. If you're not familiar with the term, there's some resources we'll probably provide to you at the very end. But just to set this up nationally, kind of zooming out to the U.S. for a second, here in the land of the free, we have the highest incarceration rates in the entire world.
Yep.
To frame that in a stat, the U.S. makes up only 5% of the world's population, but has 25% of the world's prisoners. We've got 2.2 million people inside America's prisons and jails today, which is a 500% surge over the last 4 decades. Like that right there.
Just sitting with that, it's significant. I mean, so just you're talking about the decade since 1972, I think is the actual date, right?
Yes.
There were 300,000 people in our prisons in 1972. And today there are 2.2 million people in our prisons. It's about 700 for every 100,000 people as in the prison system.
Yep. And then when you dig a little deeper, you talk about inequities of who is in prison. Who are we imprisoning? Right. Carolina Justice Policy Center has the statistics that the African American men have a significantly higher percentage of lifetime likelihood of imprisonment. 1 in 17 white males will do prison time compared to 1 in 3 African American males. And then also this idea that we think about Law and Order type shows where we think about trial, everyone goes through this process, right, where they get their chance and the truth is found out. But that's a myth.
Right.
Not everybody goes to trial. If every single person had a trial, the whole system would shut down, which I think disincentivizes people, right? We have set up our system to discourage people going through that process. And so it ultimately comes down to if you can take a plea deal, right?
Right.
And you're getting pressure from an attorney who may not represent your best interest. They're just seeing you as a stat. And not a story, not a human, right? Go to jail for 3 years because if you go to trial, you got a risk of 30 years or more if you lose. And so as a result of that kind of disincentivization, 97% of people just do not go to trial and instead take a plea bargain.
97%.
97% of people take that plea, which means it's on their record and they do that time. And that they weren't even assessed whether they were guilty or innocent.
That's right.
They just get that mark on them. That is in our system, then kind of brands you for life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lot there.
That's a lot. And that's scratching the surface and probably need to maybe just sit with that for a little while. It's hard to imagine that is real. Well, it's hard for me to imagine. I'm sure some of our listeners are like, yo, this is my community. This is my family members, right? I have it on both sides of my family. My cousin who's a public defender in Cook County in Chicago, so he's doing the good work. And I have other members who have been in the system, so I get it. It is pervasive, and it is a crisis that we are undergoing. Like our country really is under siege for these sort of broken systems.
We'll bring you more Just podcast right after this.
Okay, let's talk about the movie Just Mercy. For our listeners who have not seen the movies, for those that you have, I'm just going to set this up very quickly. I think it's helpful. Dominique Gilliard, who's the author of Rethinking Incarceration, helped set this up. Now, he has that book out, but he really was thinking about ways to help unpack the viewer's experience of the movie. Okay, and so here's the overview. So Just Mercy, which I'm saying is required viewing, it's going to move you to tears and prayerfully compel you to act. The film is based upon a New York Times bestselling book, and it revolves around the faith-rooted activism of Bryan Stevenson. So for those of you who've seen the movie, it's played by Michael B. Jordan in the creation of the Equal Justice Initiative, which we'll refer to as EJI. Just Mercy recounts the tragic story of Walter McMillian, who's played by Jamie Foxx. McMillian, who we'll refer to as Johnny D, and they referred to him as that as his nickname in the movie. He's an African-American who owned a lumber company in Monroeville, Alabama. Interestingly enough, Monroeville is also the birthplace of Harper Lee. So if we all are familiar with the book To Kill a Mockingbird, Harper Lee was born there, and she is lauded in that town.
Apparently they're very proud of it.
They're very proud of To Kill a Mockingbird and of her. Okay, so Johnny D was framed in Monroeville for the murder of Rhonda Morrison, who was an 18-year-old white girl. So Stevenson we go through this journey with Johnny D as we watch the movie, and you can sort of imagine the ride that we went on from the moment in which he was pulled over, right, and accused of killing Rhonda Morrison about a year after. I believe that's right, about a year after the murder actually took place. Maybe it was 8 months. And taking that journey of 6 years where he's on death row, faced with charges of a murder that he did not commit. And so Bryan Stevenson comes in and is exposed to this injustice and really takes us through what it is like in, Southern America at that time for a black man who's wrongfully convicted. At the end, Stevenson writes, listen, we're all implicated when we allow other people to be mistreated. An absence of compassion can corrupt the decency of a community, a state, and a nation, which I think we saw and hear in those statistics. Fear and anger can make us vindictive and abusive, unjust and unfair until we all suffer from the absence of mercy, and we condemn ourselves as much as we victimize others. The closer we get to mass incarceration and extreme levels of punishment, the more I believe, this is Bryan Stevenson speaking, the more I believe it's necessary to recognize that we all need mercy. We all need justice, and perhaps we all need some measure of unmerited grace. And so, that's heavy, right? And so what we wanted to do today before we bring in our district attorney, the Durham County District Attorney, is really talk about what our first thoughts were and how the film impacted us. Right. We, again, for our listeners, you haven't seen us, we don't have any pictures out of us, but we're different people, right? So Rob is a white man, and he's married with four kids, has an incredible history around justice and equity and how he thinks about it, the lens in which he looks through his world, and how he chooses to raise his family and be a husband and be a community member. And I'm a single mom, married 12 years, divorced, but a single mom, African American, raising a 17-year-old black boy, but from a very small town, probably very similar to Monroeville. When I was watching this movie, one of my first thoughts was, I get this. It's not in the South, but it was small town. And I was constantly, people would use the term colored with me all the time. And it affected me in a way that I didn't have a voice when I was young to talk about that word, because I was young. And so I was the colored kid, right? But that was a common language, right? Now that's probably a much easier language than I had in Ohio than you would if you were in the South, right? I'm sure I would have been called many other things, but that was the norm. That was the vernacular. And so when I thought about this movie, some of my first thoughts was you're guilty from the moment you were born. Johnny D said that. He was like, you don't know what it's like, Bryan. You're from Harvard, you're up there in Delaware. You don't know what it's like to feel like you're guilty from the moment you were born, and then to have a family and see your children. He didn't say this, but this is what I translated. And then have children who are like, my children are guilty, and you know how precious and innocent they are. But in the eyes of the justice system or the white community in which he lived in Monroeville, they were guilty and had to always be on their P's and Q's, right? Because there was no assurances that the system would work in their favor.
That's right.
They're also in a very poor situation. They were impoverished. Great family. You'll see this in the movie, an incredible system of support and love and belief, but certainly not, they were the least of, right, when it came to socioeconomic. So I tried to watch this film as if I were a journalist, and I was just sitting back, taking notes and trying to see it as objectively as I possibly could. And boy, I tell you, there's no objective way to look at this. This was just unjust.
No.
So, Rob, what were your thoughts?
Oh, so many. This journey for me goes back to first reading the book. I think it's been at least 5 years now when I sat down and someone recommended it to me, and I first heard about Bryan Stevenson and just his story. And so for me, this has been a long journey of leaning into him. I think I mentioned this in a previous episode of almost seeing him as a mentor from afar.
Yeah.
Where I couldn't have more respect for someone